it was the first time of many that would follow. But it was the first time I'd seen firsthand the pain and anguish of regrets on your deathbed. And I thought, I don't care how hard it's going to be to live the life that's true to my heart, it's never going to be as hard as getting to my deathbed with regrets.
You took a sabbatical from banking and you went to, did you go on your bush trip first or did you go to England first?
A bush trip as in the long walk that I did?
Yeah, the walk and the nomading and living in the
Yeah,
Jeep and all
sorry.
of that.
Yeah, sorry. The book's not as chronological in my memories
Okay.
as the patients were, because I
Right.
used the stories in the book that were relevant to the lesson I was learning through. Yes, I've got you
Yeah,
there.
yeah. Okay, so let's talk about let's fill in that gap a little bit.
Okay,
You
so
you
the
you
walk was
left
years
banking.
later. Yeah,
Yeah.
the walk was years later.
Okay. So the trip to England was before that, where you
Yes,
work with
so
Agnes.
yes, so I was overseas. I was in banking for a long time. Then I went and lived on an island for a couple of years. Then I went over and lived in England for a few years. Yep. And then I came back and lived in Perth. So yeah, where I had that awakening.
So you'd already had that experience then of being a live-in companion by the time you were in Perth and going to the Inspiration Factory and all of that.
Yes, I had, but I still fell back into banking as soon as I got back to Australia. Even though I'd
Mm.
worked as a carer overseas, I just saw that as a travel job. I didn't realise that it was a seed had been planted and it was going to actually lead me into a whole new career. So when I came back to Australia, I had another couple of years temping in the banking industry, and then I just realised I couldn't do this, and so life called me back to be a carer again. But yeah, in England, I was a live-in carer.
And is that when you first went to Ruth after that was she your first palliative care
Ruth
client?
was my first one. Yeah, that was
Okay,
when I was back in Australia. Yep.
got it. And is that the one where you had to tell the white lie to get the
About
job about the
Oh
fact that you
yeah,
had experience? Because
yes,
you kind of
yeah.
made a big deal about that in the book, and I really related to that because that's something I think people who are passionate about something, you're going into a new field, you want to put yourself in the best position. You're getting told by someone with experience, hey, it's not a big deal if you just say you know what you're doing, but you kind of grapple with that
Mm.
for a lot actually. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
Yeah, so it was actually my second patient I lied to the family about, because
Hmm.
the first one was just a live-in companion job that turned into palliative care. So
Right.
I was qualified for that. But it was the second family, and they asked me how long I'd been doing the work, and just really trusted me with their mum. That was Stella, and the agency that I was working for had sent me into this job and said, don't tell them you've only had one client, just tell them you've been with us for years, you're really good at this, you know what you're doing, just go in there and ring us if you've got any problems. And I was like, okay. So yeah, the family were just lovely, and they had so much trust in me that I felt very guilty about lying to them, and I came clean years later to them because I stayed in touch. But I just, yeah, I hated it. I hated that I'd lied, even though I was doing the job I was being paid for. They were getting the service that they were paying for, and more, because I got on so well with their mum, and she was a meditator and a yoga teacher, and yeah, but it just didn't sit easy with me, because I just think that as hard as honesty is, it really is the only way to be. And so it really went against my values, but I was so desperate for work and felt such a calling to be in this field and wanted to stay in it, that I was worried that if I didn't go along with what my boss had said, then I may not actually have any work.
I'm curious, looking back at that moment now, as someone who's had so much life experience, would you make the same choice to lie?
Good question. Possibly. Yeah, possibly. Because I felt such a strong calling to be in that work, it had taken me by surprise to be in palliative care with my first living companion in Australia when that turned into a terminal case. But during that experience, I felt such a strong calling that, oh, okay, this is actually the job I've been asking for. I wanted a job with heart where I could just be myself, no makeup, no high heels, all that. And I realized that I'd been given that. So, yeah, I think because I wasn't qualified and I had such an affinity with the role that I didn't want to waste my time leaving the role to go and study and then come back to it. I wanted to stay in it.
Hmm. And you said Ruth was not set up initially to be a palliative care situation, but then she ended up transitioning. And that was the first time you'd seen someone do that, correct?
Yes,
And
yes.
so then Stella had her experience, and when she transitioned, and something happened right at that moment that you kind of surprised you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, she'd been unconscious, like in a coma for at least. I came in the morning at 8 in the morning, and she'd already been in that space before I left at 8 o'clock the night before. So at least 12 hours, but closer probably to about 16 or 20. But yeah, and I was just holding her hand. Oh, actually, I wasn't. I was holding her foot because her father and her husband and her son were holding her hands, but they wanted me in the room. And so I was just had my hand on her foot, and then she'd had no response at all when we spoke with her, nothing at all. And then she just opened her eyes and looked up in sort of the corner where the wall and the ceiling join. So looked up to the ceiling and just had the most incredibly beautiful, radiant smile and a look of recognition, like she recognized someone there, and she was like, and she'd gone from this being in a coma and to that, and all of us were, the three of us were just like, oh, what's going on here? And she just looked for a minute or two, just a moment or two, and then just went, oh, and closed her eyes, and then that was it. She had died, and I didn't know because I'd only been around one dying person before her, and that was a very different exit. Ruth was very obviously dying when her soul left her body. But with Stella, it was so gentle, and so then her father and her husband and the son are looking at me saying, "Is she dead? Is she dead?" And my heart's beating out through my chest, and I'm trying to feel a pulse, and I didn't really know where the
Wait, you're
pulse
holding the
was.
foot, trying to feel the pulse?
No, I let go by then. I was standing up and I've got my hand under her neck and I'm feeling her wrist, and all I could feel was my heart going boom, 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 because it's like, what's going on here? And yeah, I just didn't know. And then I just said to Stella, because we'd had such a spiritual connection, I just said, "Are you gone, honey?" And I just got the feeling, yeah, I'm gone. And so then I said to the family, yes, yeah, she's gone. And she was. That was it. She was gone. Yeah.
And you've been reading all these spiritual books, right, for all these years and studying this stuff and meditating. What did you take away from that experience when you saw that happen?
Oh, just how wrong we've got it in denying death and in being scared of death. Because wherever she was going or whatever she was seeing, I wanted a piece of that cake. She was so incredibly radiant and joyful, just absolutely overflowing with joy in that moment that I just thought, okay, well, it's not where we go to, it's where we return to. And yeah, it was,
I heard one guru say something really profound. He said, if you really knew what was happening, you would mourn when someone was born and you would rejoice when they died.
that makes so much sense. Yes. Yeah, because life is so hard compared to the look. It can be as the human experience. And then when I saw where Stella was going, I've never been scared of death since. No matter how
Mm,
many people I looked after following her, I've never been scared of death ever, because it's like, wow, this is beautiful and loving, and it's all going to be fine.
mm. And talk about Grace, your client Grace, and what was the big learning from that experience?
Mm. Grace was only a really small woman, like really tiny, but we connected very strongly straight away. She reminded me a little bit of my grandmother, who'd also been a tiny woman, and but Grace had been married to the same man for over 50 years, and in her words, he was a tyrant. And she had wanted to go traveling, and he didn't want to do any of that. And she just dedicated her life to him without doing anything that she wanted to do ever. And that's what it was like in those days. She was from an older generation, and you'd never leave your husband. What would the neighbours think? And yeah, and then when he got really ill and went into a nursing home, and so she started looking at travel brochures. She wanted to do some bus tours and just to see a bit more of Australia. She was all set to go. I think she was 86 at the time, with a really good spirit, because she was finally free for the first time in her adult life. But within 3 weeks of him going into the nursing home, she became ill, and it turned out to be stage 4 lung cancer. And she'd never been a smoker, but he smoked in the house all that time. And so Grace had huge anguish and regret around the life she had led, and really opened my eyes up to how painful regrets are at the end of your life. And yeah, I was trying to become a singer-songwriter then, and it was really hard. I didn't have a lot of confidence, but I wanted to get my message out there. And Grace held my hand really tightly one day and said to me, "Promise me, Bronnie, promise this dying woman that you will always live the life you want to live, not the life that others expect of you. You know, don't make the same mistakes as me." And she was crying at the time, and I was crying with her. And it was a massive turning point for me, because it was the first time of many that would come, that would follow, but it was the first time I'd seen firsthand the pain and anguish of regrets on your deathbed. And I thought, I don't care how hard it's going to be to live the life that's true to my heart, it's never going to be as hard as getting to my deathbed with regrets.
Hmm.
And yeah, it just gave me so much courage, and still does, because I am not going to be in that position. So yeah, she played a huge role in my life, bless her. Yeah.
And so three things are happening in the background as far as the book is concerned. Maybe it's off chronologically, but you you were keeping a gratitude journal at the time.
Yes, yes.
So were you recording all of these things and obviously framing them in the context of gratitude, but it sounded like later on in your story you were able to kind of reflect back on some of these takeaways that you were experiencing with your various clients through that journal, unless there was a separate journal.
There were
Number two,
two. Yeah.
okay.
Mm.
And then number two, you started performing your songs because you wanted them to get out there, and you realize the only way they're going to get out there is if somebody sings them, and the only person who's going to sing them right now is me, but I'm not a great singer. So, but I'm going to do it anyway because that's what I'm being called to do. And number three, you had tried to publish a photography book. So am I correct? Were all those things
Mm.
happening around the same time?
Yes, yes. So the journal, one was a gratitude journal, and one was just a regular sort my head out journal. And that's why I have such clear memories of my time, because my patients were asleep so much and I had to be in the room with them. So I was either reading or writing in journals. And I kept doing the singer-songwriter thing because the pain of going back to banking and being in the wrong work drove me forward, but also witnessing Grace's regrets helped me see, okay, I have a message to share. I have to find a way to do that. And the photography book, after all the inspiration from the Inspiration Factory, I'd done a lot of work realizing, okay, what am I good at? And that was photography, nature photography, and writing quotes. And this was before the internet. And so I had put it all together into a little gift book, and I had been trying to get that published. And it after a couple of years, I was so dedicated. I just kept going, and I had to print off a color copy every time, and it was a massive thing. And rejection letters came as paper in envelopes, and my rejection pile was probably about 3 inches high. And it was the frustration of that that made me pick up the guitar and start writing my first song. And then I thought, oh, okay, this might actually make more sense because my parents were musicians. This is actually in my genes. I know nothing about the publishing industry. Maybe I'm meant to be a singer-songwriter instead. And so I did. I just kept putting myself out there all around the open mic nights and the singer-songwriter nights until I started getting into festivals and that sort of thing. But I can't say I honestly ever really look forward to any gig I did. Yeah.
What was your mindset at the time? Were you very optimistic about things, or were you just kind of feeling like you were in a process of following your heart, and that the outcome wasn't even important?
Uh, the outcome was important because the calling to share my message was so strong. But I was meditating by then, and I was going through some really big healing. And to be honest, it was just a really hard chapter of my life. I was supporting all these families and dying people, but I had no support myself by then. I'd left the relationship with the guy from England as well. And so I was on my own and just really, just very, in so much emotional pain and with some very big walls around myself. I felt very isolated in life. And that's probably why I was such a good carer, because I had a lot of love to give and I wasn't sharing it elsewhere. And I felt safe with my patients, because when you're at the end of your life, there's really not much time left for nonsense in conversation. And so all of our conversations were really deep and beautiful. So I don't know, Light. It was just it was a strange old time, and I've always been very, very good at finding the blessings in disguise. I do think that's one of my strengths. So even when I'm going through a very hard time, I'm always determined to pull the lesson from it and pull the learning from it. So yeah, I was in that sort of place where I was just doing the best I could and loving my patients as fully as I was able.
So just for clarification purposes, were you a singer-songwriter moonlighting as a palliative care worker, or were you a palliative care worker moonlighting as a singer-songwriter?
Well, I'd probably say palliative care, moonlighting as a singer-songwriter, because palliative
You
care was
can't read,
paying.
it's not fair to revise history, by the way. I want you to answer that question from where you were at the time.
Well, in my mind, palliative care was paying me.
Hmm.
So I would have called myself a palliative carer who was trying to become a singer-songwriter. Yeah.
Mm. And then you got sick and you healed yourself, which I thought was really fascinating, because you didn't opt for the surgery that was recommended,
Mm.
and you apparently use fasting and visualization and all of that. Can you talk a little bit about that experience and what you
Yeah,
learned from it?
so I didn't write in the book what it was because I didn't want to become an advocate for the situation, because back then I had so much fear around becoming a public person anyway,
Hmm.
and we're all on such different journeys with our health. So it was, I had a melanoma on my leg, and I had nursed people with skin cancer who died, and so didn't want to say in the book I healed myself of melanoma, because I can't be responsible for what other people have done. And I've since been on a whole different healing journey with my health and haven't healed that completely. So we've all got a different path to go on. But I came across this book, and it's called Cell Level Healing by Joyce Whiteley Hawkes, and it had a huge effect on me. And so I'd had a melanoma removed, and the skin specialist said, the surgeon said I had to have a skin graft and have more work done. And so I just sat with it and asked my body, was it all gone or wasn't it? And what did I want? And I'd also, because I'm very fair skinned, and I'd already had a lot of sunspots burn off and different things going on, and I felt like I was getting a little bit sick of damage to my skin. And I'd also ridden my bike into a barbed wire fence as a kid, and got a scooter scar somewhere else. So there's a few scars on my body, and yeah. So I didn't. I chose not to go ahead with surgery, and so I went on a fast and just shut out the world, and went into some really deep meditative spaces for it. So I chose not to go ahead with the surgery. I chose not to go ahead, and I went into this beautiful space, and I'd been fasting for a few days, and then I just had this urgency to purge, and I'd been meditating for a few hours, just sitting in silence for a few hours, and doing these meditations that I learned from this book, Cell Level Healing, and asking my cells to eradicate my body from any cells that were not beneficial to my body. And then I just had to run to the toilet and vomited full on into it. And I don't know. It's amazing how much stuff is stored in the digestive system and within our body, because I was there for a good few hours, just vomiting, and then just sitting there, then a little bit more, and it was the deepest purge I've ever done. And after that, I just knew that it was gone, that it was gone, and I've never had any problem at all with that scar where the melanoma was, and that's over 20 years ago now. So it was a pretty amazing time.
Was that something you advertised at the time? Because I can imagine it can be a little bit bewildering to certain people, especially, with your family and stuff like that.
Oh no, I don't think they even know it now.
I know the
My
feeling.
Yeah, my mum would, because I share everything with her. But no, my siblings, they're just living their own lives, and yeah. Um, no, I didn't advertise it to anyone. It was a very solitary thing. It was between me and my body, and I shared it with a couple of friends who really believed in me. But it's a hard thing to share, because obviously people are going to project their fear onto you, and not necessarily, even if they love you, they're sort of like, oh, okay, and I couldn't risk that. I couldn't risk taking on anyone's fear. I had enough to deal with through my own, um, not through my own fear, but worried about their fear disconnecting me from my faith and from my knowing that I'd made the right choice. So no, it was just really just between me and God.
What would you say was guiding you around that time? Was it the meditation or was it something else?
Yeah, meditation had become a huge part of my life then. So uh, yeah, that's what it was. It was meditation had just taken me so far inward that I now trusted what was the wisdom that came from within miles more than I would from any outside advice.
Hmm.
And that's a wonderful freedom, but it's also a big responsibility, because you've got to make your own decisions.
And speaking of that, you have another wonderful story that I would love to hear about, with your first album coming to fruition and how your friend Leanne kind of, how that all came together. Can you just touch on that a little bit? Because I think it's really cool to hear how that trust and the intuition kind of plays out.
Sure. I knew it was time to record my first album. Everything in me said, yep, go and do it. And I had all my musicians lined up and everything else, but I didn't have any money to do it. I had hardly any money to do it. It's certainly not enough to record it, but it was just such a strong guidance within me, just like, yes, do it. So I just started getting organized and got everyone in place. And that included my producer, who was also my guitarist. And he was a married man with 2 kids. He had big financial responsibilities and time responsibilities. And then it got up to, I went away on a little singing camp for a couple of days in anticipation, and we were due to start on the Monday. I was moving into a house, my favourite house sit, and I was house sitting a lot then, into my favourite house sit that weekend. But on the Friday, before we were due to start, I still didn't have the money, and I was $5,000 short, which is a lot of money to come up with out of the blue. And I started, it had been building for about a week, like, okay, I've followed this, I've honoured this, but I am getting really, really scared here because I've got to pay this guy and I've got to pay all the other musicians, and what am I going to do? And so on the Friday evening, I went and sat on my meditation cushion in a panic, really, just in such a panic, thinking, what am I going to do? I was really scared, very, very scared. And so I meditated and just said, I'm really scared here. I don't know what to do. And I just got, let it go. Just let it go. Go out and have just forget about it for tonight. Go out and have a good night. And so I went out with a mate, and I had planned to go and see a band, and I was going to do it on my own. And then a friend got in touch and said she wanted to go to this bookshop that has a cafe, and how about we go there? I said, yeah, sure, let's do that. So it felt like a good distraction from my own head to be with someone else. And then she ran into another friend of hers, and while my mate was like our mutual friend was off looking at the books, I sat down with her friend and we just got chatting. And she said, tell me about your life. My life's really awful. It's crap at the moment. That's what she said. My life's crap. Tell me about your life right now. And I said, well, actually, my life's pretty crap too right now. I said, I'm waiting on a miracle, and I'm right at the 11th hour, and I'm really scared, and I don't know what I'm going to do. So tell me about your life instead. And she said, no, I want to hear about yours. Tell me what is all this about? And so I just said, well, I'm due to start recording my album on Monday, and I don't have any money, and I need at least $5,000, and I'm really scared, and I don't know what to do, but I just felt my heart just said to do this and get on with it. And she said, well, my life is crap because I'm going through a really shocking divorce, and I've wanted to support the arts for years, and my husband wouldn't let me support the arts. So I'm going to use the money I'm getting from him to support the arts. I'm going to turn up on Monday morning at your house with $5,000 in cash. and she did. And yeah, I just burst into tears, of course. And I just thought to myself, how do we ever question it? Because we don't need it before we need it. And I got it when I needed it. But we always think we need it before that. And I'd had little leaps of faith prior to that time, and I'd always landed on my feet. Someone, there was always a solution was presented at the last minute. But because this one was so large and involved so many other people, it just seemed huge. But it just taught me that we only think we need the money a month before or a week before or whatever, because it's for our own security. But life just knows that you'll get it when it'll come if you get out of the way. I'm trying to give it to you, but get out of the way. And so, yeah, she turned up and she just said, I just want to have my name on the album cover as the executive producer. So I said, sure. And she just came in, didn't want to get involved, just lay on the floor on the thick, lush carpet of this house and just sat there while we started recording the album and came to the launch. And yeah, that was it. Didn't stay in touch or anything, was just quite detached from the whole process, but was a guardian, was an angel. Yeah.
Was this when you were still doing the palliative care? Or
Yes.
did the album come out then? So how did it go?
It was okay. I wasn't really confident. It was the start of me trying to back myself, and I'm really proud of what I put out there, considering how vulnerable and broken I was at the time. It was well received. A couple of the songs got a little bit of airplay in Australia, and I got into some folk festivals to play at, just small folk festivals. But I never really made it hugely in Australia, and my heart was just, I hated going to gigs at 10 o'clock at night and playing in pubs, and yeah, it was a hard road. But my music was such a joy to me besides that aspect of it. Yeah.
You told this story in your book about where you just gave a kind of metaphor for the typical drunk Aussie guy who would come up in front of you on stage and pretend like he was God's gift to women, and you went through this whole thing. It was really funny. Just wanted to put that out there. Did you feel like you were
Yeah.
living your purpose at the time when you were
I
doing the palliative care and the music and the trying to do the photography and all of that? How closely were you aligned with what you felt was your purpose?
I felt I was, because I was honoring my creative talents and I was making a difference in the world in a way that wasn't selling insurance to people in the bank. It
Mm.
was, as long as it wasn't anything to do with banking. Uh, yeah, I did. I felt like I was on the right path, and I was meditating 2 hours a day, an hour morning and afternoon, and I was very connected to my inner guidance. But I had no idea that I would be called onto the author's path, and I am so grateful for that, that I could get my message out there in a way that's much more suitable to my quiet nature than playing in really loud pubs. Yeah.
And at the time, you kind of, I guess, saw yourself just, I'm going to be house sitting and nomading and, taking up little jobs here and taking a little time off in between clients to reboot and trying to do some creative pursuits here and there. That's kind of what you saw for yourself for the next foreseeable future.
Yes. Yeah. My cousin's friend who I used to play music with a bit, he said to me one night, well, you've got to settle down sometime, Bronnie. And I said, do I? Why? And he said, well, everyone does. And I said, no, not everyone does. And he said, okay, tell me then, where would you like to be when you're 50? And I think I was about 30 at the time. Where would you like to be? I said, oh, I'd love to own a motorhome. But I did actually find a settled bone in my body years later. But yeah, that
Yeah.
was where I was at back then, Light. I was just drifting and letting life take me wherever it wanted to go.
Well, you eventually graduated yourself from the palliative care work, and you've got yourself settled into a cottage. And that was another great story. We don't have to get into that because there's so many great stories, but you got all this secondhand furniture. It was like timed perfectly without trying to time it. And it just all kind of came together. And that's right at the beginning of the sort of songwriting for prison, the women's prisons endeavor, for which you had zero experience teaching people. You had no budget. And how did that all come together?
Yeah. I just got this really absurd idea one day when I was with a patient that I wanted to teach songwriting in a jail. And I
That's
think it
so
was because
random.
I know. I'd never been inside a jail in my life. I knew no one who'd been inside a jail. I have no idea what that was about. But the only thing I could put it down to was I wanted to work where there was some hope. And so, at least if I was helping people in jail, they could have some hope to improve their life. I'm not sure. I really don't know. It was just a guided thing. And so through one of my patients' friends, I ended up finding some funding for a jail. It took about a year or so, but she had said to me, because this patient was really hard work and a very authoritarian woman, and she was just really hard work, and so her friend said to me, I've seen how you look after her. If you can do that, you can do anything. I'll help you find the funding. And I said, okay, great, thank you. So we had to find like an hospice organization, charity organization, to fund the donations through the philanthropic grant that I got. So yeah, I taught in a jail. I went to a jail and said that I'd like to set up a songwriting program and that I was working on finding some funding. And they said, sure, that sounds fine, because to them, I was a volunteer, so I was offering something for nothing to them. And I was supposed to have all this security training and everything else. I found out 6 months into the job, but I hadn't. And one day someone said, how come you've got your handbag with you, one in the staff area? And I said, well, I'm just going to put it in the locker. And they said, yeah, but you can't bring a handbag in. And I said, why not? I have every week for the last 6 months. And they said, you have to empty your contents and put them in a plastic bag so they can be seen. And I said, oh, no one's ever stopped me. And they said, oh, okay. So like there were all these loopholes that just the doors just opened for me. And which was sort of good because I had actually snuck in a couple of CDs for them, for the students, and you know, because they needed some music. So, yeah, so I taught songwriting for healing to a beautiful group of women, and it was then that I actually realised how much I needed to be looked after myself, because they gave me so much love. I thought I was there helping them, and I was, in teaching them how to play the guitar and how to write basic songs. But I guess they were just sensitive, good-hearted women who got lost along the way. And I received so much love and genuine care from them that they were healing me as much as I was healing them. So it was a really unexpected time, to be honest. Yeah.
And you had a bit of a dark night of the soul moment, a little bit after
Straight
that.
after that. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So
Suicidal thoughts and depression.
yeah, the works. Yeah. So I was once the funding ran out from the jail, my energy was just getting lower and lower, and some new neighbours had moved in next door to the cottage I was living in, and they were fighting all the time. So it wasn't a nice home environment either. And so I just had this calling to move back to the country, and I hadn't lived in a rural area for years, like 25, 27 years or something. And so I rented this house on a cattle farm, a vegan on a cattle farm, and it was right by a creek, and it was beautiful. And I just thought I'll just have a little break. I had a little bit of savings. I thought I'll have a break for a month or so, then I'll start looking for some sort of work. And during that time, it was just like someone unplugged me from the wall, and I just fell into a dark pit. I just had no energy to do anything, and ended up in a really huge time of suicidal depression, where I just felt like all the work I'd done on myself and all the acts of courage I'd taken and all the decisions I'd done that was honoring my heart and I felt like I hadn't got anywhere. I was like, okay, well, I'm still here. I'm still in pain, emotional pain. I'm still financially not strong. I'm still not knowing where I belong. And yeah, and so it got really bad, shockingly bad. But I found an amazing counsellor, and counselling in those days wasn't as big in Australia as it is in the States. And so it was quite something I wouldn't tell anyone I was having counselling. It was that sort of stigma in those days. And she was just brilliant. She just said, "What are you doing? You're trying to go for a gold medal in the Carers Olympics, and you got to look after yourself." And she just helped me amazingly. But in the end, I did just reach a breaking point where I thought, I can't live with this anymore. And I tried to write my farewell letter, which was really just to my mum in apology. And I worked out this road I was going to drive off, and I owned a van, so I was right at the windscreen. You sit right at the front of a van. So I was all set to do it, and in tears and trying to scribble this letter, but I was just so distraught that I couldn't write it properly. And then the phone rang, and I I don't know why I picked it up, because I normally don't pick up unanswered, like, numbers I didn't know. I'd let it go to the message bank, and it was just this really chirpy voice. "Hello, is that Bronnie?" And I'm like, "Yeah, who's this?" And she said, I can't remember her name, but it's so and so. And she was from a health insurance thing, offering me ambulance insurance. And my number was silent. I hadn't given it out to anyone. I'd protected it for years. I'd always sort of been really private in my personal details. And yeah, and here's this woman just ringing out of the blue and reminding me that, I might not actually succeed in killing myself. I might actually need an ambulance and be even worse off.
Mm.
And yeah, then I just thought, okay. Okay. So I just like, no, I don't want any ambulance insurance, thanks. And just sat there
I'm not going to need it
stunned.
anymore.
No,
Yeah.
exactly.
I
Yeah.
have a question about this experience. So you also mentioned that there was a friend of yours that would call you and he'd say funny stuff like, "You better not be killing yourself right now." Is there
Yes.
anything that anyone could have done to help you get through that period, looking back on it now, or maybe even thinking about how you were, where you were at the time. Because I know I just had a friend commit suicide recently, and I was in touch with him, and I knew he was having suicidal thoughts. And I'm just curious, from that vantage point, when you're in it, is it about people calling you more? Is there anything people can do to kind of help, or is it just a lost cause? And obviously there are exceptions and everyone's thing is different, but just, I'm wondering what your experience was.
Well, you can't escape yourself. So it doesn't matter how much support you might get from externally. You still have to deal with the internals. But meditation is probably what saved me for during the day. I would still somehow sit and still have that sense of connection with divinity and think, okay, you know, there's still love somewhere within me. But I think that the greatest thing we can do for anyone with depression is accept where they're at and not try to fix them, because that puts a lot of pressure on people, and we are naturally good people. Humanity is naturally good and wants to support each other, and we do naturally care for each other, and underneath all the other fear and nonsense, but we are naturally good instinctively. And it's so easy to just want to fix people, but I think that acceptance is probably the thing that actually was the greatest act of love that I received, because it made me feel, okay, I've got support there, but I've got support no matter what, and I don't have to pretend to be better today, and I don't have to take their advice. And you know, a lot of friends dropped away because they just couldn't handle me. I was in that space for about 6 months, and but those that stayed were just, they weren't trying to fix me. They were just like, well, how are you today? And I'd say, well, I'm, you know, can't swear, and so, you know, I'm not so good. But then they wouldn't sort of, you know, say, you've got to get out and meet more people, or why don't you try this or try that, because they knew me well enough to know I was giving it my best shot to heal as it was. And I think I just had to be, and I think at some point all of us have to be cracked open, and that's how it came for me, that it cracked me open through depression after giving for so many years and not receiving. And if we're trying to distract people from that lesson, I mean, some people, like your friend, won't come back from it and they will take their life. But there's a lot of people who would go through depression that, if they were given acceptance and the right environment to heal, eventually they would actually come through it and think, yeah, okay, I'm starting to come through this. Life's feeling a little bit, just a millimeter lighter today, and the next day, oh, it's okay, I'm feeling a little bit lighter. And eventually, it's not an overnight thing, but you do, yeah, there is a turning point.
I got a sense from your book that the depression for you just kind of lifted. Was it more of a gradual process than what you articulated in the book?
No, I mean, it did lift. It lifted, like the actual, like, suicidal thoughts, the doom, the heaviness, that did lift for me. Absolutely, it lifted. But what I mean is, like, this, it was still a gradual process to get back into life,
Got
to
it.
find my way back into being capable of working. And so it was just like each day, like, okay, I'm feeling a little bit more capable today. Today I can do this. You know, I could drive to town and have a conversation with the shop assistant or whatever. But yeah, my life transformed really quickly, and that's when my blog took off straight, almost immediately following that, where I just said, okay, I'm coming through. I'm through the worst of it. The ambulance time was the turning point, and I knew then, okay, I'm not going to kill myself. I've got to that point where I was that close to doing it. I want to value the gift of my life now. Show me how to live in a different way. And so that's how the cloud sort of lifted, and my eyes were open to new colours, and it was like the whole farm was illuminated, like I'd come off some really, like I'd been in a 20-day silent retreat or something, and everything, all my senses were heightened. And yeah, it was pretty phenomenal for me how it all happened.
So you'd already started Inspiration in Chai at that point.
Yes, I started that when I was teaching in the jail. So I'd been writing
Okay.
it all the way through. a lot of those articles aren't on the blog anymore, but yeah, I was still writing at least every couple of weeks for it. But I wasn't writing about me going through depression. I was writing
Mm-hmm.
about beautiful things that were happening in nature and using that as a tool for teaching. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And talk about writing the top 5 regrets. What inspired that article at the time that you actually sat down and wrote it? Why that
Okay.
day?
Yeah. Um, it was while I was in the jail, and I'd come back from a really awful gig, and I just didn't want to do any more gigs. And a music magazine had asked me to write an article about teaching in the jail. So I did that. And then I wrote that for them. And then I thought, why aren't I writing more? I love writing, not just songwriting. You know, I love writing. I'll start a blog. And I'd just been to some seminar thing that they were saying how to make money, you know, from being online. And one of those people was a blogger. And I thought, oh, maybe I'll start a blog and I could make money from that somehow. And so I just thought, what do I write about? And I even Googled good blog topics. But instead, you know, my guidance inside just said, write what you know. And I thought, okay, well, I've just finished working with the dying people. Their regrets shaped my life, transformed my life over the last 8 years. I'm going to write about their regrets because that was my biggest takeaway from all those years was how painful regrets are at the end. And so I just sat down and wrote it because I'd been mastering it and recognizing what the regrets were for 8 years. And I put it on my blog while I was teaching in the jail. Then I went through this whole time of depression and suicidal thoughts. And then as I came out of that, as I was taking one step back and then the next step back, then the blog just took off. And then I was offered a deal with an agent to get the book published. And so, you know, she just said, do you want to write a book? And I said, yeah, everyone's got a book in them. And I said, I could only write this book if I wrote it as a memoir because death is so unrelatable to living people. And so I knew that if I wrote it as a transformation of my own life, then people would connect with that, and death would become a bit more relatable through my exposure to it. And so I signed to her, then it was rejected by 25 publishers. So I was released, and so I put it out myself. And then by then I was in a new relationship and I was pregnant. And then in the same 24 hours as my daughter was born, my dream publishing house offered me a publishing deal. And then it became their fastest foreign rights seller in history, in Hay House history. So it's now in 32 languages with a movie in the pipeline. And so we don't know the seeds that we sow when we sow them, because that was in the cottage near the jail when I wrote that article, and I still had to go through that massive healing process. And what that did was it cracked me open and helped me let go of so much nonsense that had been holding me back. And it's sort of,
I have
I
one
don't know.
question about your process when you were writing that article, because, you know, as a writer, you've been writing for decades, right? Every time you sat down, you wrote in your gratitude journal, you wrote in your regular journal, you're telling these stories, you're remembering these things. There must not have been anything different about that particular day and that particular post. And maybe before that, you were only getting, I don't know, 30 people looking at your blog or something like that. When you were writing it out, the 5 regrets, did it come out as 5 regrets, or did it come out, you just kind of listed all of the regrets and you said, well, let me kind of consolidate these into 5 different things? Like, did you already have that narrative in your consciousness before? And you sat down and just wrote it out, or did it just kind of, were you channeling it kind of like Neil Donald Walsh and his conversations with God experience? Like, what was that process like?
Well, I'd just been to this seminar about blogging, and they had said, make sure you have good titles, top 5, top 10, top whatever.
Right.
And so that's how that came about. Though initially I didn't even call it the top 5 regrets of the dying. I just called it regrets of the dying. And so it had been, I had already recognized 5 themes. That had already happened naturally, that there were 5 themes, but I hadn't identified it to myself that there were 5. it was just like, oh, here's that I wish I hadn't worked so hard conversation again. I've had this conversation before. Oh, here's this one. This is, because they came from different angles, I hadn't actually narrowed them down into 5 bullet points. But I also knew that there were these 5 common conversations, even though I hadn't numbered them. And so it was just because of this seminar, which I hadn't enjoyed at all, but it gave me the idea to put it into point form, that I thought, okay, well, let me sit and think about this properly. And I sat down and I wrote out, what each of the regrets were. I thought, oh, okay, there's 5. And then I looked at a couple others. I thought, no, that's the same as number 1, but it's just said a bit differently. Oh, that's the same as number 4, but said a bit differently. And that's when I just got it down to 5.
So that article ended up getting, I think, something like 8 million views in 3 years. What do you
Yes.
think what do you think it was that caused people to connect with those 5 regrets?
I think that it was so simply written, because I'm not an academic. I just wrote it as one person talking to another, so it was very relatable. I just think it was the timing, just that I found a niche where the world's consciousness was ready for it, and I certainly didn't intend to. I just wrote what I knew, and that was what I knew. But I think that mostly because it gave people permission to make changes, and it's made so many positive changes in the world. Like, so many positive changes in the world have been made as a result of the article and then the book, through people that have read it.
And when you were getting rejected 20 and 25 times, what message did that send to you as someone who written this viral article about this important subject?
Well, I just thought, stuff them. I just thought, okay, well, I've been rejected from so many gigs I applied to get, and so many festivals I tried to get into. And so I had just kept going with that and been independent. So I thought, okay, well, clearly there's a message here. And I guess the amount of people who had read it and were writing to me telling me how the message had affected them gave me the confidence to think, no, okay, well, stuff it. If you guys don't want to publish me, I'll publish it myself. And so there was never a thought of quitting when it came to the book, especially because I didn't know what else I was going to do. I knew I couldn't go back to care work. I knew I couldn't go back to banking. I knew that I was a different person than who'd gone into depression. So I was pretty much just open to whatever life put in front of me then. And I knew no other way forward. It was almost like I'd burnt my bridges behind me. And yeah, so I just thought, okay, well, I'll put it out myself. And that's what I did. And then 4 months later, it had gained enough traction for me to be offered a publishing deal in the same 24 hours as my daughter was born. Yeah.
It's amazing. And we're going to wrap this up now because I want to respect your time. But I normally ask the question, how do you define success? And obviously, the conversations I'm having, we're not talking about material success. So people will talk about, following your heart and, things like that. But you have a catchphrase, and I'm going to just fit this into this question: smile and know. You said smile and know a lot near the end of the book that I read about the top 5 regrets. And I want you to just talk about what that actually means in a practical sense.
Okay, so if you're doubting something and you're getting caught up in the fear of it, if you actually just smile and think about it, then you can't feel scared and sad about it. So I had asked for some guidance, like, how's this going to unfold? And I got that guidance. Just smile and know. And so it's an act of faith with joy attached. And so if you get yourself all caught up in trying to work out how everything's going to happen, you don't need to know all the hows. Just smile and know that it will. And that's it. Just smile and know, and then you're getting out of the way, and life can breathe a big sigh of relief and say, oh, thank goodness, now I can help you. Yeah, you're ready.
Beautiful. Thank you. And so the last thing I want to do here, I'd like to kind of loop it back around and just offer few reflections of my own after hearing more of your story. Um, Almost without exception, Bronnie, when I have these conversations with people and they talk about the things that they've experienced in their life, there's a strong connection to their favorite toy or activity as a child. And, you know, when you were back in Northwest New South Wales, when you and Prinny having your adventures and experiences, the thing that she made you feel is the thing that you essentially helped us feel. You helped your palliative clients feel that. You helped the women in the jail feel that. And even to an extent, the people who you were performing for feeling that, because you were leading with vulnerability, you're leading with your heart. And that's what little cute little animals do. That's what dogs do. And that's what we love about them. We feel like we can be ourselves around them. And you've embodied that in your work. And I just want to acknowledge you for that, and acknowledge your courage and your bravery. There's so much we didn't really talk about in your story, which is a good thing. It's a good thing that you've done so much in that regard that we couldn't even get to all of it, you know, in a reasonable amount of time. So I encourage those of you who are listening to definitely pick up. You've written 3 books now, correct?
Yes, yeah, the
So there's
top
the
five
top 5
regrets.
regrets. Yeah,
Yeah,
go
and
ahead.
then your year for change and bloom. Yeah,
Yeah. So I highly,
five regrets is what everyone knows. Yeah,
yeah. Did you write it yourself? Because it's so well written. It almost feels
yeah.
like there was a ghostwriter or
Oh
something helping
no,
you out.
no, no! I wrote it and I sent it out unedited. Like it had reached over 1 million people globally before it was edited, and it was only when I said to the publisher, "Do you think we could edit it before the film comes out? Whenever that's going to be." COVID has delayed it. He said, "Yeah, let's just do it now anyway." And so the new release is sort of an edited version. But no, I just wrote like I was writing to my best friend, and
I love it.
maybe that's why it's done so well. I don't know.
Who would you like to play you in the film?
Oh, probably.
The young Bronnie.
Yeah, really like Mia Wasikowska. I think that's how I'd say her name. I really love her. I'd like it to be an Aussie. I'd like probably Chris Helmsworth could be my love interest, I guess.
Okay. Well, we're looking forward to that.
I don't know. Whoever resonates with the story the best. Yeah, who knows? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, I would again thank you so much for just being on your path and being courageous enough to be the black sheep and to own that role in your life and to blaze the trail for the rest of us. We didn't get a chance to talk about my personal experiences, but we have a lot in common with nomading and just a lot of the things, following your heart, meditation, et cetera, et cetera. So I was super excited to talk to you. I did want to mention, though, that you do have a course right now called Write for Delight course that you created for people who, like you were at one time, have this inclination to express and be creative in creative writing. So is that something that is on offer, and how do people find it?
Yeah, sure. I've got Regret Free and Loving It and Write for Delight, 2 courses. They're at bronnieware.com. And yeah, Write for Delight is aimed at people who just keep talking themselves out of it and think too far ahead and forget how much pleasure there is in expressing themselves through writing. And it's helping a lot of people. So hopefully it will help some of your audience as well, Light. But I'd also like to say thank you for what you're bringing to the world. You have such a wisdom and lovely energy about you, and I'm really delighted that life has come and crossed our paths together through that strange sphere of social media. So, many blessings to you, and I'm so grateful.
Thank you. Yeah, we've made it to the end of the tunnel here. So, and it's funny because I have been so familiar with the 5 regrets for a long time. I first heard it in a song by this it's like a compilation album called One Giant Leap. I don't know if you know
Mhm.
about that, but in one of the songs there's an opening dialogue where this person, I think it's a scientist, talking about the 5 regrets, and it's been in my consciousness ever since then. And of course I've seen it a lot, um and so it's definitely out there. It's pretty prevalent, as you know. And so I
Yes.
was excited to put a face to a concept or a philosophy that
Mm.
makes all the sense in the world. So yeah, thank you so much for joining this conversation, and I'm wishing you all the best. And everybody, like I said, make sure you read more of the work. It'll leave you so inspired to keep going, even though things aren't necessarily happening in the way that you think they should be happening. Just smile and know.
If you like that video, you're going to love the next one. Click this thumbnail right here, and I'll see you over there.